Welcome, everyone, to the second to the last webinar in the NCDE Spring 2024 webinar series. The topic today is how to recruit people with disabilities to your exchange programs, including volunteer, study, intern work, etc. We are recording this webinar, and a recording will be made available after the fact. In addition, we will send a satisfaction survey, and I'm also going to try to fix my internet connection. Uh, uh, but first, what we will do is I'm going to invite our panelists to just give a brief introduction to themselves while I switch networks, and then we'll go over ground rules, and then we'll get into our presentation. Does that sound good? Do you guys hear me, Allison and Heather?
Yes, you did break up for a minute there, but I heard that we will just say a quick hello and introduce ourselves while you fix your tech, and then once you're back, we'll go into introducing our programs.
Exactly. So take it away.
Fellowship for Young African Leaders. I am joining this conversation from Washington, D.C., where it is kind of gross and rainy today, but that's okay. And just a quick thanks to Justin and his colleagues for inviting me to participate today. And I will pass it over to Heather.
Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Theisen-Gandara. I am here representing the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship Program. I am the lead for recruitment, outreach, and communications. And it's great to be here. I want to thank Justin as well and Allison for being a great co-panelist, and Justin for leading the effort. We're honored to be here with our partners at Mobility International USA, who are great experts in the field. So we're glad to be here today and look forward to representing our programs.
Thank you, Heather and Allison. So as you guys can see, we have a lineup of panelists today that are going to share their experiences with you. And we're going to hopefully, you're going to hopefully walk away from this with some ideas for how to improve your recruitment initiatives or to get them started, or whatever the case may be. So we're going to send a satisfaction survey at the end, and we hope that you'll fill it out. I should also note that this webinar is being captioned by a live captioner. If you require access to captions, you can bring that up and note that they are not automatic captions. And there will also, along with the recording, be a transcript. And with that, I think what we'll do is just go ahead and get into it. As I mentioned, we're gonna we have some slides. So let's bring up the slides starting on the second one. I think we did our introduction. I don't know if the slides are up, but if they're not, let's bring them up. And so our panelists will do some opening remarks and kind of share about their programs and their work with recruitment. And then after that, more or less 10 or 15 minutes in, the Q&A essentially starts. We have prepared questions on our end. So we'll be going panel style, answering, discussing the questions on recruitment. And as that process goes, I hope that audience members will also share any of your questions that you might have. Lori is my supervisor, is working in the background doing technical support, and she will keep an eye out for your questions and make a note of them. And with that, I'd like to invite Allison from IREX to take up the first part of take up your presentation.
Great. Thanks so much, Justin. So again, I am Allison Jennings, and I am the manager for the Leadership Institutes for the Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders, which is such a long title that it's hard to fit everything on there. But as Justin noted, I do work for IREX. We are the implementing partner. If I could have the next slide, please. So just to give you a very brief overview of the fellowship, this is a very different program than the one that Heather works on. So I'm excited to have her share about hers as well. But the fellowship is part of the U.S. government's oops, sorry, muted myself there. Part of the U.S. government's Young African Leaders Initiative, or YALI, which was established in 2010. The fellowship is the flagship program of the Young African Leaders Initiative, and the fellowship was established in 2014. So we are celebrating the 10th anniversary this year, which is very exciting. The fellowship is a program of the U.S. Department of State with funding provided by the U.S. government, and it is administered by IREX. So again, we are the implementing partner, and we are the partner that has implemented the fellowship since its inception. Since 2014, nearly 6,500 young leaders representing every country in sub-Saharan Africa have participated. And the primary component of the fellowship is the 6-week Leadership Institute. So our fellows come to the United States. They are hosted in groups of 25 at U.S. colleges and universities across the country. While they are here, they are focused on one of 3 thematic tracks: business, civic engagement, and public management. And this is not an academic exchange. This is a public diplomacy program. But as part of their training, they are focused on academic coursework, leadership training, hence the name Leadership Institutes. They are networking, they are doing community service, and of course, because this is a public diplomacy program that is focused on mutual understanding, they are also doing cultural exchange. So that's all kinds of different events, activities, and things to integrate themselves into their communities and have an understanding of the US while also sharing their cultures and countries and traditions. If I could have the next slide, please. So to give you a sense of our program cycle, it is a year-long cycle, even though the fellows are only in country for 6 weeks. Our fellow application is open from August to September, and then from September, sorry, I keep hitting my space bar. From September to November, we do have a network of about 3,000 readers who do read each application individually. From November through January, the semifinalists are interviewed by their local U.S. embassy or consulate. From February to March, there is a whole lot of activity on the back end. So we are doing the selection, the placement, which will come up in kind of the Q&A part of our conversation, and then applicant notifications. Really where a lot of the disability accommodations planning work happens is when we are planning for fellow arrivals. So between March and May, we are planning to provide support and accommodations for those fellows who need it. And then also we do have, for all fellows, a pre-fellowship orientation, which is hosted by their local U.S. Embassy and Consulate. I am actually really fortunate to be leaving tomorrow for Angola and Botswana to engage with the fellows there. And then from June to August, the fellows are in the U.S. And I will say, you know, this is something where we are working very closely with our embassies and consulates throughout this entire process. So they are absolutely our partners in all of this. And if I could have the next slide, please. So just to give you a sense of who the fellows are, it is a very large program. So for the 2024 fellowship, we had just over 53,000 applications. And of those, about 3% of our applicants self-identified as having a disability. I will say they are not required to disclose if they have a disability. So we do know anecdotally that there are usually a few more, but 3% was the number this year. Out of all of those applications, there were a total of 1,170 candidates put forward by U.S. embassies. And out of those candidates, 8% self-identified as having a disability. So we do ask posts to prioritize applicants with disabilities because we want to make sure that we are being inclusive as possible. Out of that 1,170, we selected 700 fellows, plus alternates, usually about 200 or so alternates. And so out of that final pool, 9% of selected fellows self-identified as having a disability, 8% of the alternates and semifinalists self-identified as having a disability. And a semifinalist in our world basically means someone who was not selected. You'll notice there's a little bit of a discrepancy in those numbers. The very short version of that story is that when we are going through the final selection process, we want to make sure that we are prioritizing strong applicants who may need accommodations to make sure that they are selected as a fellow so that we are able to plan to provide those accommodations rather than selecting them as an alternate and potentially being in a situation where they are promoted to being a fellow too late to provide appropriate accommodations. Over the years, we have had fellows with pretty much every type of, or general type of disability, mobility, vision, hearing, chronic health. We do have learning and neurological disabilities on here because this time, for the first time, we have a fellow who self-identified as having autism. And also noted a few other diagnoses. And then just generally speaking, for our overall group of fellows, our fellows are between the ages of 25 and 35. So they are young, but they are young adults. We do have a balance between biological sex and gender. We do ask both of those. We have about 1% of fellows who identify as non-binary. And then we do have a mix of urban and rural areas, but it does skew a little bit more toward urban areas. With that, if I could have the next slide, please. I know Justin said these will be shared, but you're always welcome to reach out via our shared inbox. And there is a lot of great information available on our website. Since this is just the tip of the iceberg of all of this information. But with that, I will again kick it over to Heather.
Thanks, Allison. Okay, next slide, please. We'll kick things off with the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship Program. So we'll move on. Just a reminder, I'm Heather Theisen-Gandara. I'm the lead for outreach and communications. And next slide, please. Just to let you know a little bit about the Benjamin A. Gilman Scholarship Program. The Gilman Scholarship Program is sponsored by the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, or ECA, in the U.S. Department of State. ECA leads a wide range of academic, professional, and cultural exchanges with the goal of increasing mutual understanding and respect between the people of the United States and people of other countries. Next slide, please. The Gilman program, in a second, I'll go over the eligibility, but just to frame what this is for you, the Gilman program is a scholarship that provides funding for study abroad. And I really want to note there is no minimum program length. So there is some academic credit requirements, and this is a certification that the institution will provide, stating that this is credit-bearing programs, and it can be an outside program as long as the institution accepts the credit from the program. So it is a little bit different than the programs that Allison described. But as far as eligibility, which again we'll go over in just a moment, 100% of Gilman International Scholarship Program recipients have Pell Grants. And so 100% of Gilmans have financial need, and nearly 70% identify as racial or ethnic minority students. Nearly 60% come from small towns or rural communities, and nearly 50% are first-gen college students. And here's some numbers about where we're at. Since inception in 2001, there have been 41,000 added to the great Gilman alumni community. They've been to over 160 countries and represent over 1,300 US institutions. And I want to note today we're talking about recruitment. And since the inception of the program, early on, our numbers showed about 6% of our students reported having a seen or unseen disability, self-reported this. We also do not require this information if the student does not want to share, but we've watched that grow into about a 12% statistic currently. And I'll go over throughout this webinar why we think that number has increased. Next slide, please. So to receive a Gilman scholarship, you must be a US citizen, undergraduate student, a federal Pell Grant recipient at the time that one goes abroad, and it must be a credit-bearing program, as I mentioned before. And just noting again, there used to be a minimum length requirement, but that is no longer. So that's important to note. Next slide, please. And there's the Gilman McCain Scholarship as well. And this is for child or spousal dependents of active military service members. Also, you must be a US citizen or national, undergraduate student, credit-bearing program, no minimum length requirement, but the student can be a recipient of any type of Title IV federal financial aid. So that is notable. Next slide, please. And when we talk about recruitment, some of the questions we're going to go over that Allison and I are going to answer, very focused on, of course, we are intend and always our application and our website is accessible in terms of 508 compliance, but beyond that, we also try to have accommodation and assess needs for all events we have, virtual and in person, and make sure that we're providing services as needed, accommodations for anything that we can, and as I said, in person, such as simultaneous interpretation, always subtitles. And then providing resources and raising awareness that one part of the scholarship that we try to raise awareness within the disability community is that eligible scholarship expenses, which are listed on our website, one of those categories are disability accommodations. So that's important to note and important for students to know when they're applying. And then we also have partners such as MIUSA, and then of course the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange, or NCDE, for additional expertise and funding. We always make sure to point our students in the direction of this expertise and additional funding. And then representation and awareness is key. Voices from the disability community talking about their experiences. So our alumni ambassadors, when we also have notable days such as the ADA anniversaries, we definitely try to have representation from our alumni community of over 41,000 students, speaking to others, letting them know that this is possible for them too, and the resources that are available. So next slide. Here's a QR code if you'd like to access our website, and then also one-pagers. And then I'll just end the quick slides with our contact information, and we'll move on to the question portion.
Thank you, Allison and Heather. Those are great points you made. Thank you for those introductions. And yes, without any further ado, maybe we could, we've noticed it sounds like in both of your programs, there's been an uptick of students with disabilities participating. And just as overall, I think over the last 15 years, the statistics show an uptick in the participation of disabled people in exchange programs in general. And so the first question that I'm hoping we can go into some more detail on is, for both of you, where does disability specifically come up in the applicant life cycle? Because people we know sometimes do disclose at different points for different reasons. And why don't we have Heather go first?
Yeah. So as we mentioned before, so we definitely we keep it off of all check boxes because we don't have requisite disclosure of any disabilities. So this is something that we feel is private information, of course, respecting the privacy of the individual, and at their discretion, they disclose this information, whether it's seen or unseen, upon their discretion in their application. And it's when they talk about if they need accommodations, of course, we always assess that. And then they have other opportunities throughout the application. And we also point our students again to that the eligible expenses, to what, if should they receive the scholarship funds, what the eligible expenses are. And we definitely, again, it's notable that the disability accommodations are an eligible expense. So we are trying to make that front and center to both universities, institutions, conferences that we're at, panelists who serve as selection panelists, advisors on campus, to make sure that that is understood and to let students know that there's resources. So for us, it's from recruitment through right away on the application, letting us know if there's something beyond the application 508 compliance that they need and what we can provide.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, and thank you very much. Oftentimes, yeah, like you said, sometimes people might disclose on the application, not necessarily checking a box, I have a disability, but rather by also filling out information that's just related to their application. Like, I'm going to face extra costs related to this disability, and that's why I need this scholarship. What about you, Allison, on the Mandela Washington Fellowship? When does disability come up for your applicants?
Well, it really comes up, throughout the cycle at different points. I will say there are some points where it's more applicant facing and a little bit more sort of behind the scenes. But so certainly during recruitment, our application language includes language specifically around disabilities, around accommodations that are available. We do have website information and frequently asked questions that are on our website year-round so that people are able to access that information whenever they need to. We do have recruitment support from disability-focused organizations like our friends at MIUSA. Also certainly from our alumni, because as Heather said, participants speaking about their experience are some of the best recruiters out there. During the selection process, each semifinalist is interviewed, and post interviews can be done using an accessible virtual platform that supports screen readers and closed captioning, to make sure that posts are not excluding someone with a disability who isn't able to travel for whatever reason. And it also, I will say, this isn't particularly applicant facing, but we do put a lot of consideration into that final selection process. I sort of alluded to this before, making sure that when we are selecting the fellows and the alternates, that if we have someone who is a strong candidate who needs accommodations, then we will make sure that they are selected as a finalist. We don't want to put someone in a position of being labeled as an alternate and perhaps being having a spot open up. Right now we are about 2 weeks from the end of our ad drop period, but this is already pretty far into our planning process for something like ASL interpretation or providing a human guide service. So we want to make sure that we are putting fellows in the best position for success by putting them into the finalist category from the get-go. And I will say it comes up certainly, again, they're not really applicants at that point, but during the placement process, we make sure that we are placing each fellow at the best institution, both for area of interest fit, but then also the universities that have the best resources for that particular disability accommodation need.
Nice. Thank you, Allison. And you mentioned about language, and often when implementing programs, we do get a lot of questions about what is the language to be using on materials and when interacting with individuals. So how does that work for IREX?
Sure. So we have language kind of in any place an applicant might look. And so our application and the instructions that accompanying it. So most of the language is repeated in both places, but there's a little bit more detail in the instructions. Obviously we encourage those with disabilities to apply. We do specify that an assistant can be used to physically complete the application. Obviously making sure that it's the applicant's own work. We define disability and chronic health condition because we know anecdotally some of our fellows see themselves differently than maybe we would categorize based on their needs. We explain why we are asking about their disability status. So they aren't required to disclose it, but we let them know it's so that we can best provide assistance at different stages of the application. We do confirm that reasonable accommodations are provided at no cost. We talk about the ASL Pre-Institute that we offer in partnership with Gallaudet University. So really for us, it's about providing as much explicit information as we can so that applicants have as much information as possible.
Have you ever had applicants experience confusion around the word accommodation? We had a actually program the other day where we talked about accommodation for a minute, I know about it several minutes, and then one of the people on the program responded, well, students are housed with their families in our country. Does that ever happen?
Yeah.
Like, do you have to
Yeah.
explain that?
Yes, and we do try and remind ourselves to use disability accommodations where we can so that it's clear, and then also lodging when we can. Honestly, the biggest point of confusion is applicants who say they have a visual disability, and that disability is myopia, and they wear just standard glasses. So we have more confusion around that, but yes, we do try to make sure everyone knows we're talking about disability accommodations.
Sometimes I try to like get myself to use the word adjustments. I know other countries, that's what I hear them use now, but yeah, it's something that I try to keep on top of. Um, Maybe just I'll toss this out. This was a question that came from a registrant. How do you overcome the fears or doubts that prospective applicants may have about international opportunities? And I imagine that covers a lot of different areas, not only just like, like for maybe students applying to, do a study abroad program and maybe thinking about using the Gilman for support. They might just be afraid of being away from their family or friends. And it could also be a dynamic for people looking at participating on IREX, although probably Mandela Washington applicants are probably a little more mature in that sense, but there can be fears about finances or maybe disability related things. So maybe I wonder if either of you could maybe offer some reflection on that question. Maybe Heather.
I'll go first if that's all right with you, Allison and Justin. We definitely see this as any other part of our program. We think of this as an opportunity for storytelling. In our 20-year anniversary study, for example, there was a section that asked alumni whether or not they had seen themselves imagine themselves abroad. Over 60% of the alumni community reported that they did not foresee going abroad for themselves. They didn't understand that people like them, first generation college students, other categories, lower socioeconomic status, for example, went abroad. So they didn't feel like they fit in that category. We're trying to change that. And that means a representation from a lot of different communities, particularly first generation college students, and all that comes with that. And that includes students and voices and stories from the disability community. We had an alumni ambassador who had a reading disability who shared her story with applicants across the country as she did recruitment at institutions. So that human to human contact is very important, and not sort of a checkbox as in, tokenism. We're very careful about something like that too, sort of this genuine, really voices and experiences from different different backgrounds, different experiences from different communities, to make that seem like a reality for people who may not have otherwise seen themselves doing something like this. And so we had also another alumni representative who was a wheelchair user, who talked about she was an alumni ambassador for a year and talked with several candidates for the scholarship about, and their families, about tips and tricks for studying abroad as a wheelchair user, the particular country she was in, and the different cultural expectations of living with the family and what that looked like. So these voices of experience are really the key, and what we see writ large as storytelling. That really is helpful in connecting with and addressing the fears and letting students know that it is indeed possible for someone like them.
It's awesome, Heather. Storytelling is a big part of it. And I know Gilman has a really cool follow-up program that alumni do where they do outreach in their communities. And in fact, we've had a chance to work with some of your alumni on their projects. So that's really awesome. Of course, we also have a lot of personal stories on our website people can access, and it definitely is a powerful thing. Allison, what do you think?
I would agree with everything that Heather said. I mean, we use storytelling as well. We certainly are conscious of representing all aspects of diversity of our fellows, but particularly fellows with disabilities, to make sure that if applicants are engaging with our website, they are seeing this. If they are engaging with our Facebook page, they are seeing themselves represented. Certainly that's a little bit easier to represent wheelchair users or cane users. But we also do feature stories about fellows who use ASL, or well, who speak ASL usually as a second language, or third or fourth or fifth. But the thing that I would add is that we also rely on our partners at U.S. Embassy consulates, because they are sometimes the first point of contact for someone who is asking. And so making sure that the staff at the embassies and consulates have the information they need to confidently say, yes, you have a disability, you should 100% apply. That will not impact your application in any way. You will be evaluated on the merit of your application, not because you have a disability. But yeah, storytelling, I think at the front end is really the best that we can do.
Thanks, Allison. On a slightly different topic, if anybody, you mentioned earlier about just kind of on the language question, just giving information to prospective applicants on how you approach disability concerns that might come up. And I think if anybody wants to see a great example of how you educate alumni of a program or partners in the field about how to recruit people with disabilities and what are some of the commonly asked questions, definitely go take a look at some of the materials that IREX has put together on their website. It's great. And I just kind of wanted to know, I wanted to ask you to comment on, sometimes we can think recruitment is all about encouraging, and sometimes it's just about just kind of giving more transparency on those policies. And so maybe could you go and talk a little about how IREX educates prospective participants about the policies and just also about the way things are done with disability in the United States. Sometimes people can apply with misconceptions.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly, the area of our website that has the frequently asked questions has a link to a document that is information for fellows with disabilities. And that is a document that does include things like, if you have a visual disability, these are the types of things we will provide. So it might be, a voice recorder, or it might be an additional white cane, or those sorts of things. If you have trouble walking long distances, we can provide a scooter. So it really lays out, sort of very generally speaking, what's available. Really, for us, those in-depth conversations and the expectation setting happens once fellows have been selected. We do have, and I will say that the language that we use in the FAQs has been sort of vetted by disability subject matter experts. For example, Justin Harford has looked at those things. So we know that the language we're using is appropriate. But we do have individual conversations with fellows who have identified a disability that will need accommodations. And so we send them along. It's a little bit longer than I'd prefer, but it is a targeted by disability type questionnaire that they complete that goes through everything we need to know. How does it impact activities of daily living? What do they do now? How do they manage different tasks now? You know, what types of things are they, what technology are they familiar with? And we then take all of that information and then have an in-person, or not in-person, a live call with that fellow to really ask questions. And that's the time when we set expectations. And it can be something as simple as, we will provide you with a mobile phone with assistive technology. We will not provide you with an iPhone. It will be a more basic phone. But also, you know, we will, for fellows who read Braille, understanding that getting Braille documents can take a while, that they are bulky and may not be the best way to deliver materials, we'll say, you know, if there are certain key things you'd like in Braille, great. Everything else will be provided in a digital format. We will give you a loaner laptop with screen reader software. But really having those individual calls, and there's usually then we do send a follow-up email that details everything that will be provided so that there is absolute clarity. But there is a lot of question answering. There is a lot of offering possibly a few different choices of things that might work for the fellow. And a lot of it, quite frankly, depends on their level of independence, their level of familiarity with what accommodations are available. We know that there can be huge discrepancies in what fellows have access to at home versus what we can provide here. And there are times when we will say, we can offer you, you know, this particular, we can get you a bathroom that has grab bars, and we can get you, you know, a shower chair and other sort of what to us seem like pretty standard accommodations are things that are a little bit above what fellows might have at home. So really kind of talking through all of the different things that we can provide for their living situation, but then also in the classroom. So again, a voice recorder, a human guide for activities that are particularly complex. So really going through the whole range of things during those calls.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. Sometimes fellows can overestimate accommodations available. Sometimes they can underestimate it. So yeah, it's just really important to have those conversations. Let's skip ahead a few questions here and ask both of you, how do you leverage alumni contacts to do your recruitment efforts? Let's go to Heather.
Yeah, so we are so happy to see the alumni community growing and growing. I was just at the conference on the Forum on Education Abroad, and there were 20 to 30 Gilman alumni in the professional community there. And so that was really exciting. As the alumni community grows, so does representation from every possible diverse background that we can imagine. So we have an alumni ambassador program, which is really exciting. It's a term that alumni ambassadors serve for a year-long ambassadorship, if you will, where there's a time of service for a year. Ambassadors go to DC for a training, and our DC office, we all travel to meet them. There's a group of approximately 25, and throughout the year, they do some recruitment activities. They do some social media representation in different ways. We also do a lot of assessment activities with our alumni communities. We definitely have a lot of incentives to participate in these activities. And the Gilman program is building beyond a scholarship. The State Department has very much worked on building the program from a funding mechanism to a full set program. So in addition to the alumni ambassador program, there's an advisor ambassador program. So, and there's opportunities for alumni, from career development to kind of bringing diplomacy to the American people through career development seminars abroad on special topics. So students are really entering a community that is a lifelong connective community. And so as that community grows, so does the strength in their voices and the connections. We leverage them in a variety of ways. And I think my point is there's mutual benefits to that. And I just look forward to see it growing more and more, both in scope and opportunity for the alumni community, and then also for the potential applicants. Because again, there's nothing as powerful as that connection, the peer-to-peer connection, and representation in our alumni community for recruitment.
That's awesome. Thank you, Heather. What about you, Allison? How do you guys leverage alumni to do your recruitment efforts?
Similarly, I mean, we have alumni recruitment champions. That's what, you know, that's what we call them. We do have a focused alumni disability knowledge network. So fellows or alumni are talking to each other, and then certainly the ripple effect in their communities. We do YALI chats on our Facebook group page, which do include alumni. So again, making sure that they are the ones who are sharing their stories and what their experiences are. We also, just one other thing that I will add is that we have had some success also, kind of generally speaking, but using radio ads in multiple languages in rural communities that are aired by alumni with radio stations. So again, a little bit more targeted, but we're trying to kind of approach it from a couple different angles, but very similar to what Heather described.
That's a great strategy. There you go. You find alumni with radio stations. And do you have any alumni that are television anchors?
Probably. I know at one point the head of BBC West Africa was an alumna. I'm not sure if she is still in that role. But we do have quite a few alumni who are in the creative economies, whether they are radio personalities or TV personalities. So yes, there are lots of musicians. So I would not be surprised if there's a TV anchor.
Given, also, of course, this is about alumni with disabilities participating in the Mandela Washington Fellowship, and presumably many of them are connected with organizations of people with disabilities. So, Allison, what about your efforts? How do you collaborate with disabled people's organizations to do recruitment?
So the two primary organizations I would say for recruitment, we do leverage our relationship with MIUSA to help get the word out when the application is open. We also partner with Gallaudet University to do the same thing. So we have worked with them for a number of years to do, as I said, I mentioned it, it's an ASL pre-institute. So it's basically 8 to 10 days prior to the start of their leadership institutes, fellows who are deaf or hard of hearing, or fellows who speak ASL and use it in their work, come to Gallaudet and do sort of a intensive boot camp style ASL refresher or primer. They learn about deaf culture in the US. And so certainly for any applicants who are deaf, they are usually hearing things through Gallaudet University. But we also work with organizations who host our fellows for professional development experiences. And so those are 4-week internships that happen immediately after the institutes. And the institutes are kind of broad programming that would be applicable across sectors. The PDEs, the professional development experiences, are very specifically tied to a fellow's work. And so, for example, we have worked with Austin Lighthouse for the Blind. We have worked with Ability 360. And they have hosted fellows who do a variety of things. We actually, I believe, just confirmed a fellow to work with Ability 360 at the end of this summer. So any of those hosts who are working with fellows with disabilities or their work is focused on disability, we also will tap them to share information about the application.
You've had fellows work at the San Francisco Lighthouse for the Blind?
Maybe. I know Austin, definitely. I'm not
Austin.
sure about San Francisco.
Okay.
We don't usually place fellows in San Francisco. We try and keep them in kind of a couple of key hub cities.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. There's a lot of lighthouses. I know there's San Francisco. I think Seattle has one. I think Washington State. I think there's the Columbia Lighthouse. So Austin, that's awesome. Okay, well, I guess we're about 5 minutes out to the end of the webinar. I just want to let the audience know, I guess we don't have questions right now, but if you do have any questions, please send them in the chat and Lori will ping me about your questions. And in the meanwhile, another question that came from a registrant is, what are particular practices that you follow to recruit blind students? And I would probably add to that, I mean, it certainly ties in part to alternative media. I know Heather mentioned several times 508 compliance or talking about accessibility of websites, but maybe you both could offer some reflection on that question, if there's any particular practices that you follow to recruit blind students or blind people. What do you think, Heather?
Do you have something specific?
Allison?
I will admit we don't have it. Unfortunately, we don't have established practices that are, well, quite like we have with Gallaudet University, which is so focused. But I mean, other than the lighthouses that we work with in the PDE hosts, there isn't something specifically we do for blind applicants.
I would have the same answer. While writ large, the disability community, and if there was a blind applicant who needed any specific accommodation, but as far as recruitment, we have a lot of work to do in that area.
Okay. Yeah, so if the person who wrote that question maybe wants to add some clarifying information, definitely share out. I would just say, I mean, it's interesting to get this question too for me as a blind person. Actually, I'm trying to think about how I would answer the question, and I guess, you know, most of it really, I guess, is revolving around just the accessibility of written materials, of web pages. And for us, really, it's a lot of we understand physical accessibility very well because everywhere you go, there's wheelchair ramps, and a very popular metaphor for accessibility is, in fact, the wheelchair ramp. And a very popular analogy to justify accessibility is the way that ramps benefit mothers with children. But there's not as much awareness of how digital accessibility or lack of it really creates issues. And in fact, I mean, in today's era, I'd say that digital accessibility is rather where physical accessibility was 100 years ago. And it's really very, very different. I find when I look at websites, though, and when I look at written materials from the view of somebody who uses assistive technology, I very much am formulating my view of the values and the motivation of the entity based on its website. And it's if you're going through and finding a lot of pages that lack correct header, that don't use headers correctly, or that don't use alternative text correctly or at all, then it definitely makes a impression in the wrong direction. And are there any questions in the chat, Lori?
There are not.
Okay. So in that case, I think what I will just do is maybe do our panelists have any final comments to share?
I just wanted to thank MIUSA and Justin in particular, and Allison, thank you so much for being on the panel with me. And I wanted to just say that I think one important thing I didn't get to that I thought might come up in one of the questions was definitely knowing that I think Allison and I both mentioned that we depend on experts in the area, and we I think are aware when we aren't the experts, and knowing when to depend on our expert partners, and always continually learning and continuous improvement is one of the keys.
Thanks, Heather.
Yes, I will add my thanks to Heather's, both to to Justin and Lori and Heidi at MIUSA, but to Heather for being a fantastic co-panelist, and also to all of you for taking some time out of your day. I was looking through and was pleased to recognize some names, which I think is great. You know, this can be a very small world in a lot of ways, which means that there's a lot of opportunities, as Heather said, to continuously learn and grow. And I think there's a lot of great knowledge in this group. And so I appreciate being able to connect with you, even if it's only briefly on a Tuesday afternoon to start. But thank you, everybody, for your time this afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation. We had a great turnout for this webinar, and there will be a recording distributed after, expect it within a week or two. And there will also be a satisfaction survey distributed a little sooner than that. Please fill it out, as your feedback helps us improve our offerings. And also, please make space on your calendar for the last of our series on the 6th of June. The focus is going to be health matters abroad, medications, insurance, really everything you could think of about health matters, all about how students are going to stay healthy and safe while traveling on your programs. So we hope that you'll register and join us for that on June 6th at the same time. And with that, everyone, thank you so much. And we hope that you have a great rest of your week. Bye.